In the heart of Seoul, where millions of stories unfold every day, there exists a love story so extraordinary that it defies the very laws of how hearts are supposed to meet. This is not a tale of chance encounters at coffee shops or stolen glances across crowded subway platforms. No, this is something far more mysterious, far more profound. Picture this: a young woman named Lee Soo-jin, 26 years old, walking through the bustling streets of Hongdae on a rainy Thursday evening. She clutches her vintage leather messenger bag close to her chest, the one with the small tear near the buckle that she's been meaning to fix for months. Her hair, slightly damp from the mist, falls in soft waves around her shoulders, and she unconsciously tucks a strand behind her left ear, a habit she's had since childhood. What Soo-jin doesn't know is that somewhere across the city, in a modest apartment in Itaewon, a man named Park Min-ho is sitting at his desk, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. He's just written in his journal: "She probably took the longer route home today because of the rain. She hates getting her shoes wet, so she would have stopped at that small convenience store on Hongik Road to buy an umbrella. But knowing her, she forgot to bring enough cash and had to use her card, which always makes her feel slightly embarrassed." And he would be absolutely right. Min-ho has never seen Soo-jin's face. He doesn't know her address, her phone number, or even her real name. Yet somehow, impossibly, he knows that she drinks her coffee with exactly 2 sugars and a splash of oat milk. He knows that she reads mystery novels on the subway, but always carries a romance novel in her bag as a backup. He knows that she talks to stray cats in a baby voice, and that she always checks her phone exactly 3 times before leaving her apartment. How is this possible, you might wonder? How can one person know another so intimately without ever having met? It started 6 months ago, on a particularly cold February morning. Min-ho, a freelance graphic designer who worked mostly with international clients, had been experiencing the strangest phenomenon. He would wake up with vivid dreams, but these weren't ordinary dreams. They were like watching someone else's life unfold in perfect detail. At first, he dismissed them as his mind's way of processing stress. After all, he had been working long hours, surviving on convenience store meals and too much coffee. But the dreams were so consistent, so detailed, that they began to feel more real than his waking life. In these dreams, he would see through someone else's eyes, a woman's eyes. He would experience her morning routine, the way she always set her alarm for 6:30 but snoozed it twice, the way she hummed while making breakfast, always the same melody, a song from an old K-drama her grandmother used to watch. He felt her emotions as if they were his own. The slight anxiety before important meetings, the joy when she discovered a new bookstore, the loneliness that settled in her chest during quiet Sunday afternoons. But here's where it gets even more extraordinary. Soo-jin, completely unaware of Min-ho's existence, had been experiencing something remarkably similar. Every night for the past 6 months, Soo-jin had been having the most vivid dreams about a man she'd never met. She would see his world through his eyes, a cozy apartment filled with art supplies and half-finished projects, walls covered with designs and sketches. She could feel his passion for his work, his dedication to perfection, and the way he always rubbed his temples when he was concentrating too hard. In her dreams, she knew that he drank his coffee black, that he had a small scar on his right hand from a childhood accident involving his older brother's bicycle, and that he always listened to jazz music while working late into the night. She knew that he was kind to elderly neighbors, that he left food for stray dogs, and that he had a habit of touching his collarbone when he was nervous. What made these dreams even more surreal was that they felt like memories rather than fantasies. When Soo-jin woke up, she would find herself missing this stranger, wondering how his day would unfold, hoping he was eating properly and not working too late. For months, both Min-ho and Soo-jin lived in this strange duality. By day, they went about their separate lives in Seoul, 2 people among millions, never crossing paths. By night, they lived in each other's worlds, experiencing life through each other's consciousness. Min-ho, who had always been practical and logical, began to question his sanity. He started keeping detailed journals, documenting every dream, every detail he could remember. He wrote about how she organized her bookshelf by color rather than author, how she always saved the last bite of her favorite foods for the end, and how she had a small birthmark on her wrist that looked like a crescent moon. Meanwhile, Soo-jin, who worked as a marketing coordinator for a small publishing company, found herself distracted during meetings, her mind wandering to thoughts of this mysterious man from her dreams. She would wonder if he had eaten lunch, if he was getting enough sleep, if he was happy. Her co-workers began to notice her distant demeanor, the way she would smile to herself while staring out the window. "You've been different lately," her best friend Min-ji observed one evening, as they shared dinner at their favorite Korean BBQ place in Gangnam. "You have this dreamy look in your eyes, like you're in love or something." Soo-jin nearly choked on her kimchi. "In love? That's ridiculous. I haven't even been on a date in months." But as she said the words, she realized how untrue they felt. She was in love, desperately, completely in love with someone who existed only in her dreams. The turning point came on a sweltering July evening. Minho had been particularly exhausted, having worked 3 consecutive all-nighters to meet a client deadline. As he finally allowed himself to sleep, the dream that came was different from all the others. In this dream, he wasn't just observing through her eyes. Somehow, he was aware of himself within her consciousness. He could feel her surprise, her shock, as she too became aware of his presence in her mind. For the first time in 6 months, they were both conscious within the same dream space. "Who are you?" He heard her voice, not spoken aloud, but communicated directly through thought. I don't know how this is possible," he responded, equally bewildered. "I've been dreaming about your life for months." "And I've been dreaming about yours," she replied, her mental voice filled with wonder and disbelief. They found themselves in a space that belonged to neither of their physical realities. A beautiful rooftop garden overlooking Seoul's skyline, bathed in the golden light of sunset. They could see each other now, not through mirrors or reflections, but as they truly were. Minho was exactly as Soo-jin had imagined, tall and lean, with gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a simple white t-shirt and dark jeans. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd been running his hands through it while working. Soo-jin was breathtaking in her simplicity, dressed in a flowing sundress the color of pale yellow, her long hair catching the dream light, her eyes bright with curiosity and wonder. "This is impossible," Minho whispered, reaching out tentatively toward her. "But it's happening," Soo-jin replied, her own hand moving to meet his. When their fingers touched in the dream space, both of them felt a jolt of recognition so profound that they woke up simultaneously in their respective apartments, hearts racing, the memory of that touch burning on their skin. From that night forward, their shared dreams became more frequent and more vivid. They would meet in that same rooftop garden, or sometimes in fantastical locations that seemed to be created from their combined imagination. A library with infinite shelves, a cafe that served impossible flavors of coffee, a beach where the sand was made of stardust. In these dream meetings, they talked for what felt like hours. Minho learned that Soo-jin's full name was Lee Soo-jin, that she had grown up in Busan before moving to Seoul for university, and that she had always dreamed of writing her own novel someday. Soo-jin discovered that Minho was actually Park. Minho, that he had studied fine arts but fell into graphic design to pay the bills, and that he secretly wrote poetry in a notebook he kept hidden in his desk drawer. They shared their deepest fears, their wildest dreams, their most embarrassing moments. Minho told her about the time he accidentally dyed his hair bright orange, trying to bleach it in high school. Soo-jin confessed that she sometimes talked to her plants because she read somewhere that it helped them grow, but she was pretty sure they just thought she was crazy. With each shared dream, their connection deepened. They began to fall in love, not just with each other's physical presence, but with the essence of who they were. Minho adored Soo-jin's infectious laugh, the way she got excited about small things, like finding a perfectly ripe avocado at the market. Soo-jin was enchanted by Minho's quiet strength, his thoughtfulness, the way he always considered others before himself. But as their love grew stronger in the dream world, Their frustration with the physical world grew equally intense. "I need to find you," Minho said during one of their dream meetings. They were sitting by a pond filled with lotus flowers that bloomed in every color imaginable. "I need to hold your hand in the real world, to see your smile with my actual eyes." "But how?" Soo-jin asked, her dream self looking as frustrated as he felt. "Seoul has over 9 million people. We don't even know each other's last names, or where we work, or—" "We know more than that," Minho interrupted gently. "We know everything that matters. We know each other's souls." And so began their quest to find each other in the waking world. Minho started with what he knew from his dreams. He knew that Soo-jin worked in a building with a distinctive green glass facade, that she bought her morning coffee from a shop run by an elderly man who always wore a baseball cap, and that she took the subway line 2 to work every day. Armed with these clues, he began exploring different areas of Seoul. He would wake up early, buy coffee from shops that matched his dream memories, and observe the morning commuters, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who had captured his heart in the realm of sleep. Soo-jin was conducting her own search. She knew that Minho lived in a neighborhood with narrow, winding streets, that his apartment building had a small convenience store on the ground floor, and that he often worked late into the night with his desk lamp casting long shadows across his walls. Every weekend, she would explore different districts of Seoul, walking through residential areas, looking for buildings that matched her dream knowledge. She felt like a detective following clues that existed only in her subconscious mind. Music shifts to a more hopeful, determined melody. Weeks passed. Both of them were exhausted from their double lives, searching by day, meeting in dreams by night. Their friends and family began to worry about their increasingly distracted behavior. Minho's older brother Jin-woo cornered him one evening at their monthly family dinner. "You look terrible," Jin-woo said bluntly, serving Minho another helping of their mother's bulgogi. "When's the last time you got a proper night's sleep? And don't lie to me. I can see the dark circles under your eyes from across the table." Minho wanted to explain, but how could he tell his practical, no-nonsense brother that he was in love with a woman he'd only met in dreams? That he spent his days searching Seoul for a face he'd only seen in his sleep? "I'm just working on a difficult project," he said instead, which wasn't entirely a lie. Similarly, Soo-jin's mother called, her with increasing frequency, worried about her daughter's distant behavior during their weekly phone calls. "Soo-jina, are you eating properly? You sound so tired lately. Are you working too hard at that company? Maybe you should come home to Busan for a weekend, get some rest." "I'm fine, Ioma," Soo-jin would reply, but she knew her mother could hear the exhaustion in her voice. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. They were becoming sleep-deprived from spending too much time sleeping, too much time living in dreams. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening in late August. Soo-jin had been particularly discouraged after another fruitless day of searching. She had walked through 3 different neighborhoods, visited countless coffee shops, and still hadn't found any trace of Minho's world. Feeling defeated, she decided to take a different route home from work. Instead of her usual path through the main streets, she wandered through the smaller alleyways of Itaewon, a district she rarely visited. As she walked down a narrow street lined with small apartment buildings, something felt familiar. The way the evening light fell across the pavement, the distinctive smell of Korean fried chicken from a nearby restaurant, the sound of a piano drifting from an open window. It all matched the sensory memories from her dreams. Her heart began to race. She slowed her steps, paying attention to every detail. There, a small convenience store with a bright yellow sign exactly as she had seen in her dreams. And above it, a modest apartment building with balconies facing the street. Meanwhile, 3 floors up in that very building, Minho was taking a break from his work. He stepped onto his small balcony to get some fresh air, stretching his arms above his head to relieve the tension in his shoulders. As he looked down at the street below, he saw her. Even from that distance, even though he had only seen her face in dreams, he knew with absolute certainty that it was Soo-jin. She was standing in front of the convenience store, looking up at the building with an expression of wonder and disbelief. For a moment, neither of them moved. Minho gripped the balcony railing, his knuckles white with the intensity of the moment. Sujin stood frozen on the sidewalk, her eyes locked on his face. Then, as if moved by the same impulse, they both smiled. Minho disappeared from the balcony, and Sujin could hear the sound of footsteps running downstairs. She waited, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the entire neighborhood could hear it. When Minho burst through the entrance of the building, slightly out of breath, they stood facing each other for the first time in the physical world. He was wearing the same white t-shirt and dark jeans from their first dream meeting. She was, dressed in a light blue summer dress that fluttered in the evening breeze. "Sujin," he said, and hearing her name spoken aloud by his voice, the same voice she had heard in countless dreams, made her eyes fill with tears. "Minho," she replied, and they both laughed at the surreal beauty of finally being able to say each other's names in the real world. Slowly, tentatively, Minho extended his hand toward her. Sujin reached out to meet him, and when their fingers touched, it was exactly as they had imagined it would be. Electric, perfect, like two pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. "This is really happening," Sujin whispered, looking down at their joined hands. "It's really happening," Minho confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. They stood there in the street, holding hands, both of them crying and laughing at the same time, overwhelmed by the impossibility and beauty of their situation. Music becomes softer, more intimate. That evening, they walked to a nearby cafe. Not the fantastical dream cafe with impossible coffee flavors, but a real, ordinary place with real coffee and real pastries. They sat across from each other, hands still intertwined across the small table, and marveled at the strange magic that had brought them together. "I still don't understand how this happened," Sujin said, sipping her coffee. 2 sugars and a splash of oat milk, exactly as Minho had known she would order. "Maybe we don't need to understand it," Minho replied, watching the way the cafe's warm light played across her face. "Maybe some things are meant to be mysteries." They talked until the cafe closed, then continued their conversation while walking through the quiet streets of Seoul. Everything felt both familiar and new. Familiar because they had shared so much in their dreams, new because they were finally experiencing it with all 5 senses in the real world. Minho learned that Sujin's laugh was even more beautiful in person, that she had a habit of gesturing with her hands when she got excited about something, and that she smelled like jasmine and vanilla. Sujin discovered that Minho's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, that he had a small dimple in his left cheek, and that his voice was slightly deeper in real life than it had been in their dreams. "Can I ask you something?" Sujin said as they stood outside her apartment building in the early hours of the morning. "Anything," Minho replied. "What happens to our dreams now that we've found each other in the real world?" Minho considered. "This seriously. I don't know," he admitted. "But I think maybe we don't need the dreams anymore. Maybe they were just meant to bring us together." As if to test this theory, they both slept peacefully that night. No shared dreams, no mystical connections across the city. Just the deep, restful sleep of 2 people who had finally found what they had been searching for. The next few weeks were like a beautiful adjustment period. Minho and Sujin spent every available moment together, making up for lost time, and marveling at how well they already knew each other. Their first official date was to a bookstore in Hongdae, the same one Sujin had discovered in one of Minho's dreams months earlier. Their second date was to an art museum, where Minho showed her paintings that reminded him of the colors in their dream meetings. They introduced each other to their friends and families, who were initially bewildered by how quickly and deeply they had fallen for each other. "It's like they've been together for years," Minji observed to her boyfriend after meeting Minho for the first time. "The way they finish each other's sentences, the way they just fit together. It's almost supernatural." She had no idea how right she was. Minho's brother Jinwoo was equally puzzled. "I've never seen you this happy," he told Minho during one of their weekly coffee meetings. It's like you found your missing piece or something. How did you know she was the one so quickly? I just knew, Minho replied, which was both completely true and completely inadequate as an explanation. Music becomes more reflective. As autumn arrived in Seoul, painting the city in shades of gold and crimson, Minho and Soo-jin settled into the rhythm of a real relationship. They had their first fight, a small disagreement about which movie to watch, and were amazed to discover that making up was just as sweet in real life as it had been in their dreams. They celebrated their first Halloween together, dressing up as characters from their favorite K-drama. They shared their first real Thanksgiving, cooking a feast in Minho's small apartment and burning the sweet potato casserole while they got distracted kissing in the kitchen. But the most magical moment came on a cold December evening, exactly 10 months after their first shared dream. They were walking through Bampo Hangang Park, watching the rainbow fountain dance to classical music when it began to snow, the first snow of the season. "Make a wish," Soo-jin said, catching snowflakes on her tongue like a child. Minho looked at her, this incredible woman who had literally been the girl of his dreams, and realized that he didn't need to make a wish. Everything he had ever wanted was standing right there beside him, laughing at the snow and making his heart race with a simple smile. "I already got my wish," he said, pulling her close. "What was it?" she asked, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You," he said simply. "It was always you." As they kissed under the falling snow, both of them remembered their first dream meeting. On that impossible rooftop garden overlooking Seoul. The city spread out before them now was real. The lights, the sounds, the cold air, the warmth of each other's bodies, but the magic was exactly the same. That night, they dreamed together one last time. Not in the mystical way they had for months, but in the simple, beautiful way that two people in love share dreams. Curled up together in the same bed, Minho's arm around Soo-jin's waist, her head on his chest, both of them dreaming of the future they would build together. In the morning, they woke up in each other's arms, and Soo-jin smiled sleepily at Minho. "Good morning," she whispered. "Good morning," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "How did you sleep?" "Perfectly," she said. And for the first time, in almost a year, that was completely true. 6 months later, on a beautiful spring day, when the cherry blossoms were in full bloom throughout Seoul, Minho took Soo-jin back to the street where they had first met in person. He had convinced the building's landlord to let him access the rooftop. Not the magical dream garden they had shared, but a real rooftop with a real view of their real city. "Soo-jin," he said, getting down on one knee as the sun set behind the Seoul skyline. "I knew everything about you before I ever met you. I knew your heart, your soul, your dreams, and I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life loving you." Through happy tears, Soo-jin said yes, and as he slipped the ring onto her finger, they both laughed at the beautiful impossibility of their love story. Their wedding, held the following autumn, was attended by friends and family who still didn't quite understand how two people could fall so deeply in love so quickly. But Minho and Soo-jin didn't mind. They knew that some love stories can't be explained, only experienced. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Soo-jin whispered in Minho's ear, "Do you ever wonder why it happened? Why we were able to find each other that way?" Minho spun her gently, then pulled her close again. "I think," he said thoughtfully, "that some souls are meant to be together, and when they can't find each other the normal way, the universe finds another way to make it happen." "Through dreams," Soo-jin said softly. "Through dreams," Minho agreed, and as they continued to dance, surrounded by their loved ones in a real ballroom with real music and real flowers, both of them knew that they had lived through something magical, a love story that began in sleep and bloomed into the most beautiful reality they could have ever imagined. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary love stories are the ones that shouldn't be possible. Sometimes, Two hearts can recognize each other across the impossible distance between dreams and reality. And sometimes, just sometimes, knowing everything about someone you've never met is exactly the beginning of the most beautiful love story ever dreamed. In Seoul, a city of millions, Park Min-ho and Lee Soo-jin found each other against all odds. They proved that love doesn't always need a meet-cute in a coffee shop or a chance encounter on a subway platform. Sometimes, love finds a way through dreams, through the mysterious connections that bind souls together across time and space. And if you ever find yourself walking through the streets of Seoul on a quiet evening, and you see a couple holding hands, looking at each other like they hold the secrets of the universe, it might just be Min-ho and Soo-jin, two people who loved each other before they ever met, and who will love each other long after dreams and reality become one and the same. This is their story. This is the proof that sometimes the most impossible love stories are the ones that are most meant to be. And in a world where millions of people search for their soulmate, Min-ho and Soo-jin remind us that true love will always find a way, even if that way is through dreams.